Updating priors and the new reality of the NFL and Dynasty Fantasy Football. That and more this week on the Footballguys Dynasty Show. And Jordan, we got Dameon Pierce finally getting some receiving work. That was the piece that's been unlocked over the past couple of weeks. Week 1, we even saw Rex Burkhead with the start. So in a month, we've moved from mid-first, a lot of rookie drafts in August, late in the process of the preseason. Dameon Pierce looking like that might not be the case, might not be pulling off that value. And now here we are a month later, a lot of people drinking that Kool-Aid, that sweet, sweet Kool-Aid. So how do you reassess where we were and then new information and where we are?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, you look at, and I think you could fit Romeo Doubs in here as well, where you have guys coming from day 3 of the NFL draft, and they basically get to a spot where they're on a success track already. I think there's a big difference, right? Just clearing the threshold of being relevant is a big jump from their pedigree. So I do think you have to sort of readjust from there. We know that the hit rate on guys coming from the 4th round is about 20%. One thing that I found is actually that in the second year they have less usage than they do in the first year, which is interesting, just from on average. I think that's an interesting prior to think about. I think you have to have some optimism about how he's done so far and what I think is not a great situation. That said, if you can get a future first for him, I think you do it without blinking, right? I think you do that instantaneously.
Is this not, it feels like a very similar conversation to James Robinson a few years ago, that it seemed, that he has the job, he runs with the job. Now, I was higher on James Robinson, the player, the prospect, the profile. I know he went later, he was undrafted, as opposed to Dameon Pierce going early on day 3. But it feels like a similar conversation where we said, are you starting him the rest of this year? They'll look over your shoulder factor at all times because of the lack of pedigree, that a free agent signing, a top 100 pick, all those things would quake his value. But we also said, who's taking his job? How much do you value the right now versus the long-term overall insulation / health of your assets and dynasty team? Were the critical questions. Is there someone between James Robinson and Dameon Pierce? Am I forgetting someone in the meaty middle there? Because it feels like that's the last time we've had this September, October rookie year conversation about pedigree like this.
No, I think that's it. I mean, there's some prior examples of guys like Jordan Howard have been examples in this realm who have been day 3 guys who've had some success. But I mean, I would just point you to, if you look at the list of guys from day 3 who have sort of what success looks like, it looks like Lamar Miller, right? It looks like Jordan Howard. Like, that's what success looks like. So, and those guys were good. They were good for their pedigree, and they were good in the NFL. James Robinson has been a success, but that's what success looks like. So I think you have to be realistic about what your expectations are. Is he going to get to a spot where he's like a top 8 dynasty running back? Like, I think you got to be super, super skeptical of something like that happening. It's just the historical track record of these guys. Is this a good story? Yeah. Is he turned into a pretty good player so far in his career? Yeah, but I'd be skeptical of it happening for a super high end season and for a super dense hit.
Yeah, I think one key kind of qualifying question that I rattled around in the old cabeza earlier today is an old standard, which is how you feel about a player on the should I hold, should I sell, is picture them being injured for the rest of the season, a la Javonte Williams we saw in week 4. And will you sit there and wish you had sold? Are you feeling good about them as a long-term asset? And you say, well, I like them then. I'm going to like them when they come back and are healthy. And I do think, someone like Javonte Williams, with what he's shown, his pedigree, you're going to feel more okay with that than you are Dameon Pierce. And I know that's an easy low-level statement to make. I think a lot of people have it Javonte Williams greater than signed 3 or 4 times, Dameon Pierce. But I think it's thought-provoking from the standpoint of, if Jordan says, hey, a first is in play, heck, he was going mid-first sometimes in rookie drafts, checks watch 4 or 5 weeks ago, that if that is possible for you now, and that dries up because He gets injured this next game. And by the way, he's a guy that did not have a lot of usage and or production at Florida. How many times has he strung together a couple months dating back to high school of clear usage? The usage he's getting now, he may very well be up to it. But we've seen guys like Antonio Gibson and others that really, you're kind of born for this or not, and we'll see if he holds up. And there's outliers and everything. But I mean, Ezekiel Elliott, just give one example. Ezekiel Elliott on the other side of the spectrum, he's been a lead back since 18 years old, high college and in the NFL. And you know what? He's still doing it. Bumps, bruises, injuries that probably take some other players out. He's playing through. And you know what? People on Twitter are making fun of him. And he's playing through injury. But we don't know, like playing NFL running back is a hazard.
Right.
So I think ask yourself the question. You might be enjoying it. Guess what? The first couple of weeks, maybe you didn't even start him. So how many starts have you gotten out of them? The answer may be less than you think. And now you have the liquidity to get something highly tangible. And if you say no to that and he gets injured, make sure you kind of preemptively ask yourself that question. I'm not telling you what the answer has to be, but you need to be okay with what your answer is if that should occur. And I think that's a key one.
Don't you think if this situation presents itself with a day 3 running back and almost at any point in like the rookie season, you can get a first round rookie pick for him, that if you do that every time the situation presents itself, you're massively ahead at the end of the day?
Yeah, I do. Right. And especially, I think it becomes even more paramount in Superflex, where it pushes value down, where even if that pick turns later, again, you're getting someone that's trying to buy production and they're buying a profile that you wouldn't be surprised if something occurs. So that means that pick may end up being higher than they project. The 6 comps, like the career arc and kind of similarities, it's interesting because it's a lot of Shanahan guys that kind of came out of the ether. And I almost think back to the Matt Schaub Houston Texans. Remember when Kubiak was there, right? Mm-hmm. But we have Dominic Williams, he was the most successful. He had 2 more running back 1 seasons. You got Jordan Howard, as you mentioned. Lamar Miller wasn't productive enough year 1, I think, for my qualifier here, top 24. But we got Alfred Morris, Mike Anderson, Elaine Descari, Zach Stacy. That's a fun name from Fantasy Pass.
It is.
Elijah Mitchell last year, who's an incomplete because we really don't know, what he becomes after missing, this year pretty much. But out of that's 6 guys that qualify, 1 top 12 result beyond year 1, 3 top 24s, and 2 Cinderellas. It struck with midnight, and you're turning the pumps back into the cleaning shoes. So that's a pretty big spectrum. I will say the high end outcome is just 1. So, and again, a lot of those guys were very system based. This isn't system based, but I will go back to the point of January through May is not going to be fun for you if you're a Dameon Pierce roster person. So there's a lot of outs that Houston can exercise. And you know what? Do we think, here's the other part of the equation. Is the running back 2, Rex Burkhead, in this equation strong enough that Houston, in a team building mindset, thinking about 2023, are they really going to stand pat and say, we're good? Because that's the other part. If the running back 2 is pretty weak, they're doing something. Mm-hmm. We have this conversation every year. They're going to do something, even if they like Dameon Pierce. And then they're like, oh, well, so-and-so is available. That's even better than we thought. Let's get Alexander Madison.
Right.
Should that, or, a Leonard Fournette type player that's been available out there roaming. So just be careful. What we're saying is be careful. You can sit there. Right. James Robinson, again, is such a wonderful story. We can talk about him 10 years from now, about a guy that he's the starter right now. He's keeping around 1 running back over there. That's immensely impressive. Outlier.
Yeah.
Story.
Yeah. And the other thing too is like you think about that arc. This is going to be a good rookie running back class. It's going to be a good free agent running back class.
Annually, I think free agent running back class is going to be good now.
Yeah. They have the 8th most cap space, depending on how you kind of measure it, right? So they're going to have cap space to spend. This is a team that has links to guys in New England as well. Like even if it's a Damian Harris type situation.
The point is tons of outs.
Right. There's a lot of different potholes to trip over along the way in terms of these guys. And I think you just have to be careful with guys from low pedigree, right? We know, And I think your example is really instructive. And whenever you hear these sorts of things, I was listening to Trent Dilfer today just talk about, how analytics doesn't understand like situation and momentum and all that stuff. One of the problems with sort of cherry picking analytics is that you sort of miss what the overall lesson is, right? Which is, if this situation presents itself, you should strongly lean in one direction, right? And you have to have a really persuasive case to go the other way, in terms of, hey, this is like you said, if day 3 running back becomes a first round rookie pick at Superflex, you have to sell him, right, in his rookie season. When that happens, you have to really strongly lean that way, unless there's an excellent reason to not do that. And this doesn't present as one of those situations. So I think if you follow that rule generally, that'll work out for you. And I think that that's the same way with a lot of the analytics rules, right? A lot of things that we know and a lot of things that we understand is just sort of odds and probability bets, right? You sort of follow them that way, right? Like, hey, this is a general rule. So when I see situation X present itself, I know how to react. Unless there's an extreme example of why I shouldn't react that way. And I think that a sell of Dameon Pierce is just a classic example of that.
Yeah, and we keep talking about, I think what you said, have a really darn good reason, but you can't just keep making exceptions. Like I think a lot of, whether it's shows, analysis, and people talk through and convince themselves. Because when we say, oh, you can have one exception roster spot, of just like, I believe in this guy, if you want to call it the Jeff Janis rule or whatever, but it's just a guy that you're like, I can't quit you. I know you can't start for me. You're not an injury, you wouldn't benefit from an injury as a backup running back. And then, depending on the format, obviously you got some backup quarterbacks and premium. Maybe there's premiums at tight end that qualify, but there's not a lot else. And everything else is an exception. So if you make an exception, I think it's almost like a slippery slope. It's a mudslide. Like, it keeps going. You're like, you made one, and next year you make 3, and it just gets worse. And you got to be super careful. And so what you're saying, these tent posts, these guideposts, you've got to say, and basically the whole idea is, the answer is rhetorical. You don't have a good reason.
Right.
You don't have a good reason. You just kind of like the cut of their jib, to use a phrase, or
right.
But it's like, no, it makes no sense. And like you said, you build up the sample size. Any one of them could work out, the outlier scenario. But in aggregate, like, I go by probabilities, and it's amazing when I see situational aspects for short term, and they oscillate and be like, oh, well, this guy should be way higher. And I get questions like, oh, so-and-so should be higher. And it's amazing how quickly a lot of times they end up ebbing back down to what their historical probabilities are, or guys that you forgot about. Justice Hill's a great example. Like, he was a good metric profile early day 3, and he was popping last week. Obviously, he popped his hamstring as well, but he was one that, he was seeing touches over, and again, running the best I've seen him in the entire NFL, finally healthy, but seeing touches over J.K. Dobbins, who still coming back and getting his form. But the point matters of, that's a guy people forgot about, injured forever, like Rashad Penny, but good profile. Guy can play. And you saw a guy can play. So I think that's an interesting one, where his probabilities back then were like 20%, 22%. But I think a lot of people would put him at 2%, and here he is popping like a guy that, should have odds in the 15, 20% range still, because we haven't really seen confirmation that he can't. It's still been time coming. Chad Parsons, Jordan McNamara, episode 123 of the Football Guys Dynasty Show. And Jordan, we started the recording a little late because we started having our own mini podcast. You were talking about Geno Smith. So give a few of the highlights as we were mixing it up back and forth on Geno Smith. And he fits perfectly in the updating priors and what is the new reality for players and teams.
Yeah, I was sort of pitching around the idea today, just sort of thinking about it in my head of like, do you take a second for Geno Smith? And my answer to my own question is, my lean is no. And the reason for that is he's a starting quarterback for presumably the rest of the season, assuming health. I think he's playing well enough to earn that, right? He's playing as a top, depending on how you want to measure it. You look at some advanced metrics like PFF and some other things, like playing like a top 8 guy. He could be even higher depending on how you want to carve it up. But certainly playing well enough to warrant lineup consideration for sure, and a pretty long leash for a team that is frankly finding themselves in a better situation than they could be. Ultimately, I mean, I think you have a couple of different situations that could play themselves out, assuming health, right? He could play the rest of the season, kind of be middling, and they address the position, or he could play himself into a Tannehill type situation, which I wouldn't necessarily rule out. So I think it's a classic case of, we came into the season, it's found money largely. But I think you have to be careful when you find money to not just say, well, okay, well, this is found money, I'll take 60% of its face value, right? Like I wouldn't, there's a trap of saying, hey, I got this for nothing. And so any profit that I get is profit, where I think you're actually leaving some opportunity on the table by just selling for a third, or just, or just, in this case, like taking a second, like he's got, I mean, I know we recommended him over Stafford this week and I didn't do it. And I'm kicking myself about it in several spots, right? So it was generally a pretty good Jordan week in Dynasty this week. There was some very good things happened for me. That was not one of them. And so he's, when you actually go down the list of just by the default football guys scoring on the season, there's some pretty alarming names behind him. So Gino, we have him at 9. Behind him include Russell Wilson, Tom Brady, Derek Carr, Aaron Rodgers, Baker Mayfield, Matt Stafford, right? There's a whole bunch of other guys below him in terms of the pecking order. I think that when you look at him, he's in a spot where I think he can be lineup useful. And I think, what would you pay for that, right? I mean, it's tough to get a starting quarterback for anything less than a second-round pick. And you're honestly, what are you trading away? You're trading away the opportunity to select a non-premium player at a non-premium position, where instead you're with a guy like Gino, you have a premium position sort of locked in, and you still have to see how long you have that for.
Yeah, and looking at the quarterback landscape, I mean, for example, guys on big leashes, you mentioned Geno Smith could start the rest of the year. Jacoby Brissett is on still, about 10 starts left, 8 starts, somewhere in that range. So most of the season remaining. The Justin Herbert injury has so far cost him 0 games, so we don't know about Chase Daniel. Teddy Bridgewater is going to be on the shorter term side projected. Again, we don't know about Tua, how much. He's already been ruled out this week, but to say he's going to be out for the rest of the year, a couple months or something like that, is putting the cart in front of the horse with what we have now. Daniel Jones, does Tyrod Taylor start half the year, going, at some point? There's really not, Andy Dalton with Jameis Winston, that's going to be shorter term. Jimmy Garoppolo would be the one, but again, he was one that was far more costly at every single turn of the road. Cooper Rush, same thing. So again, you have to ask yourself, I mean, this is a pretty unique combination of week 1 starter playing well, should keep the job. It was interesting though, some of the most recent trades, the only one I found that I can really kind of pitch you that's relatively close to the price point you're mentioning was Geno Smith and Allen Robinson for DJ Moore. So that would be a profile upgrade. You're moving to a higher level player, maybe not for this year, but on the macro level of a profile. Robinson not producing really at all. And honestly, that's one of my more disappointing players and situations of like, I thought this could be great. And Robinson has been like literally the exact guy from Chicago. But anyway, not to make it an Allen Robinson section, but just I saw a lot of like third and David Bell, a third alone for Geno Smith. So they're not even in the conversation of, taking Jordan's advice and saying no to a second round pick for a sale. I still think, if anything, you're saying buy. If you have questions about quarterback, buy, because you might be able to sit there and buy for a naked third.
Yes. Yeah. I think if you could buy for a naked third,
instead of preventing the sell, I think you need to be saying buy.
Yeah, let's do fine. We'll do the buy for a third. Like, yeah, there's certainly spots like I have to.
But Stafford, right? Stafford is the one. Now, again, I'm buying Stafford long term because the profile mid-30s. We've seen this many times before. The veteran quarterback has the down year. He's throwing picks. Everything's short. Maybe it's a little bit of the arm. There's a lot of stuff going on. But I will say that right now, I mean, you can't feel good about starting him. So Geno Smith, do you start him a lot over Matthew Stafford the rest of this year? And if that costs a third, or, hey, you've got other question marks. I do think Tom Brady now is moving in the right direction. You got the weapons healthy. Let's hope it stays that way. So he's going to be one that you mentioned that is currently behind that'll now be, but it's amazing that you might have a Jared Goff and Geno Smith tandem that is like wreaking havoc in your premium format that everyone left guys for dead. Right.
I have a Dak Prescott, Deshaun Watson team that is the all play record on it is, I believe it's 39-5, right? Because of
Geno
and
because of Goff, probably.
Geno, Goff, and Cooper Rush actually have.
Did you start Geno week 1? No, because you would have started Dak.
No, I would have started Dak.
Okay, so starting week 2, you're probably like, I have to start Geno Smith.
I think
and you're like, please don't be horrific. And he's been really great for 3 weeks.
Found money, right?
That's hilarious.
Yeah.
I did in the open here want to close out with J.K. Dobbins. He is the most interesting player, and Baltimore week 4 was the most interesting team from a running back standpoint for me on a number of fronts. I write the high leverage opportunities. You can find that over at Footballguys. You see a nice big chart every single week on those targets plus goal line carries. They're mixed together. They're weighted. But Baltimore is the one. I literally started tracking this years ago because of Baltimore. They are the reason. They are so bad at optimizing running back in the Lamar Jackson era. I was like, there has to be numbers to this. And the Rams have been bad too. And they're teams that you got Dobbins, who's been high up, not as high as previously. Cam Akers, super high up. And it's just like, these aren't good situations, people. This isn't like the only guys really that have consistently outkicked their coverage for what the team offers has been Nick Chubb and Derrick Henry. There might be one other guy, but they outproduce those high leverage opportunity scores in a decent and meaningful way. So Baltimore, I can't believe what I saw. So they were, 3 years ago, 31st, 32nd in 2020, 31st in 2021. First 3 weeks of this season, 31st, 28th, and 30th. They are dreadful. Dreadful is an accurate word. You know what they were this last week? 2. And J.K. Dobbins, I'm telling you, this is going to be the most interesting thing. Is he finally healthy? Now, he's been healthy before, and they were still dreadful. But is something changing? It's 1 week. So probably the answer is aberration. But he's healthy. They featured him this past week in the passing game. So, and that's honestly, he came with an elite receiving score. Never been used that way in the NFL. So, and Justice Hill being out, does that help? At least right now, they don't want to go back to Mike Davis. Mike Davis is not going to see what Justice Hill did a week ago. Kenyon Drake is not going to see what. So I want to see the next few weeks. Gus Edwards might be back in a month or something, but I just want to see now. Do we trend towards Baltimore being sneaky average in Hilo? And that can unlock some things for J.K. Dobbins. Again, wildly skeptical of this whole thing. But I just wanted to point that out, that we saw something in week 4 that we pretty much have not seen in 3+ years.
Can I tell you the thing that concerns me just looking at the box score?
Yeah.
Dobbins 14 routes. Patrick Richard, who's their fullback, 16 routes.
Yeah.
So this would be
and Rashad Bateman missed a chunk of the game.
Right. This would be a horse of a whole different color.
And Mark Andrews caught 2 balls, I believe.
Right.
So yes. Yeah, I know there's some.
I'm with you. I'm hopeful for it. I got him in a home league where I really want him to succeed.
They have just been like righted in Sharpie. They've been in the bottom 2 or 3 spots perpetually.
Right.
They're finally up to tied for 25th. So progress.
You have any thoughts on their decision to go for it at the goal line?
I was going to ask you. Here's always what you need to know about, like, are they kicking or going for it or whatever they're doing? Is, do you think that the other team is happy about it or not happy about the decision you made? So you sitting there as a Bills fan, were you happy they were going for it, or were you wishing that they would kick?
It makes your life a lot harder if you go for it, right? Like if the other team goes for it, you have the MVP with the ball, probably the MVP if he voted right now, with the ball in his hands at like the 1 yard line, right? Or inside. I don't remember.
It was like at the 3 or something.
Right.
Yeah.
With Mark Andrews, right? You had a guy breaking open, right?
The play they ran, it literally was a straight drop back and he didn't get outside the pocket.
It went poorly. And again, the execution of it was poorly. The outcome of it was bad. The outcome of it was really bad because Jordan Poyer made an unbelievable.
Oh, I know, and it
good
resets
interception.
to the 20 instead of the
Right.
3.
Right, and he got hit by like a moving truck and held on to it. Right,
To
so
me, I would look at it this way: that in a tie game. Sorry, in a tie game, and if they're going to play that differently, the Bills drive versus if they're down by 3 and versus down by 7. I say that there was like 4 minutes to go. It was not a 35-35 game. This wasn't a Goff and Geno Smith barn burner. This was 20 all or something. I think if there's 7 minutes left, I say you go for it. 4, you're down to 1 possession maybe each. I think you go for it. I mean, I think you kick. Like I was like, I mean, I know they had been carved up for what, 2 drives in a row or something, but I don't know. I think you take your chances that you go up 3. And I know it worked, the interception part, and you get an extra 15 yards, but Baltimore would have got down there. But at least you have it of they might be tight enough on time that they're going to kick the field goal.
Yeah,
the odds of you stopping them before field goal range, if you miss it, is pretty low.
That's super hard, right? And so I mean, I think your easiest way to win the game is to go for it, right? Because in the NFL,
I just think that's going to make them more aggressive.
That's true, but they're going to play 4 downs anyways, right?
I know about the 4 down thing, but I mean, just literally you can kick at the 35. I mean, I think there is something different mentally if you're going down there down 7 versus down 3.
Yeah, there is. And
we've seen teams operate differently. If you're down 3, the number of times we see a team score a touchdown and win the game versus they kick, I don't know. I'd love to see that breakdown. Anyway, but I know, like, if I was rooting for the Bills in that situation, I would sit there and be like, I'm glad you're going for it.
Interesting. I was glad. I would have been,
because at best that's 50-50 that you make it, and if you don't make it, I know my odds go way up.
Yeah, see, I wouldn't have thought of it that way because I would have been there with my back on the back. It turned out that way because I'm out at the 20. But I think if you were like, all right, you're going to either have the ball here on the 3, right? If that ball's on the 3, it's a whole different world, right? That is a different story, and you have to go that.
I can't remember the throw exactly. Like, was there an actual? Did he? I mean, I know he was pressured, but did he just literally throw it to a spot and have no regard for what defenders? Like, was it egregious?
Made a really good play to intercept it.
All right, okay.
Yeah.
So it wasn't egregious intercept. I don't remember it specifically.
No, and honestly, like, I come from it with the, like, I'd rather lose being aggressive because, like, I've lost being not aggressive. Like, I've seen Buffalo lose. I've seen plenty of teams lose by where you left the opportunity to seize it on the field, right? I mean, we could go back just go back to Jacksonville, right? When Jacksonville had the Patriots down, just think of how different the NFL would be right now if Doug Marrone had the audacity to actually throw the ball in the second half of the AFC Championship.
Bortles and Fournette going to the Super Bowl.
Do you know how different the NFL would be? Just
neither one
survived that. He lacked any courage to throw the football. And you know what? The funny part is we let him off the hook for that, right? That thing ultimately goes south. But people don't think about it because he lacked the fortitude to actually try it.
I need to go back and watch that first half because they played a perfect first half with play action and boots.
Right. Everything that worked, they stopped
Bortles
doing.
Was optimized and easy yards. It's what we say about every quarterback that has some mobility to get them some feel, some rhythm, some easy yards and completions. They did that to build the lead.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah. Then you're scared of it, right? We don't process information that way. We process it. Oh, we went for it and failed, so that's the wrong thing. Whereas if we didn't have the courage to try, I mean,
well, you always come back to this, which is the big boys in the AFC. To take down the king, you got to be all the way aggressive.
Yes.
Field goals will lose you the game.
100%. And we've seen
and we see that in the playoffs, right? The Mahomes, Allen, Lamar Jackson, maybe Burrow, we'll see how this goes, but whatever that grouping is, it's probably not going to be field goals.
Right. When you have a superhero on the other side of quarterback, like, kicking is the wrong answer, whether it's punting or field goals. Like that's just not enough, right? Like,
do you think you should just deactivate your kicker?
100%. Like the
For the
Bills had
game.
this issue with the punter, you know,
That
and
will
the
psych them out.
allegations, which are really bad. But I almost said, like, if they cut him, like maybe they can't find another guy, and that's actually great because it'll force them to go for it. Like, I would have been plenty happy last year if they had just deactivated their punter and used that for somebody else, anybody else, an extra receiver, an extra blocker, a third quarterback. I don't care. But don't take your punter with you to Kansas City, because anytime you kick against Mahomes, it's the wrong answer. And they did it like twice at midfield. And then, you know what, at the end of the game, like they got the ball back, and that shouldn't have ever been an issue because you just should have went for it all along the way and never had let it come down to that. But you let one of these guys that are running around wearing a cape in the AFC at quarterback, like they are going to like you can't give them a chance because they're going to take it and they're going to beat you. And like, I like the Ravens doing it.
17 seconds.
17 seconds. Yeah.
Yeah.
I can talk about it now. I feel like this is personal growth for me. I can talk about
but just, we literally have to just say 17 seconds that anything can happen.
Yes. 100%.
Do not be surprised. And you can't give him an inch.
Right.
Can't give him an inch. And that's why, again, tie game, you freak. We've seen this twice, I think, this year in the NFL, which is no lead is safe. Time is your enemy. And teams have had a chance to literally drain the clock and kick a previous extra point, which is 19 yards or 20 yards or whatever, and get the heck out of there. And you leave the door open, and you leave the door open to lose because time is your enemy.
Yes.
Want to remind you about, and what's not your enemy is footballguys.com, and a lot of content. I mentioned high leverage opportunities there, a little bit about J.K. Dobbins, the outlier week for Baltimore, Jordan Dynasty waivers of the future. So not just for redraft, it's a different spectrum looking at available players, looking at outlook, short-term, long-term, all of that. So he has you covered with Dynasty waivers of the future. I do a Dynasty trading post, so you get a lot covered. Football Guys Dynasty has expanded in 2022. So you want to be a part of that. If you're listening to this show, you're going to want to read our words, and we have a bunch of others. We talk about Devi, got a ton of Dynasty rankings on the site as well. And you're going to subscribe by giving us some love by going to footballguys.com/dynasty winners.
It's time for the Stash of the Week, powered by Sleeper.
That's right. And usually a running back this week. And Jordan, this is a bit of a curveball because I think a lot of people think that this is the low-hanging fruit. I think he's a sleeper. This is actually a negative. This is actually a downgrade because I think it's Mr. Michael Boone there in Denver, because friend of the show, I think you actually have t-shirts that are themed off of Mr. Latavius Murray. This is the Latavius Murray arc of the last from Sunday through Monday or Tuesday. Wild. He goes from being activated and actually pushing Mark Ingram for lead snaps and touches with the Saints to apparently going back to the practice squad, and then now being signed by Denver. So Mike Boone, though, I think is the sleeper, because I think the longer this plays out, multiple weeks out from now, Boone is going to be right in his number 3 role. So he's a sleeper, because I think the low-hanging fruit is Latavius Murray. What are your thoughts in Denver?
I mean, how about Murray playing in London?
Right.
Flying back to New Orleans and then getting signed by Denver.
Maybe he might not have even flew back to New Orleans. They diverted mid-flight. They just shipped him a box.
Frequent flyer miles there for the logo. So what do you think? What's your expectation for again on a short week nonetheless, right? So he goes from London to playing on Thursday night. I mean, it's a lot of expectation, I think, for him to be relevant week 1. What's your play in terms of actually starting someone in Denver this week? Is it Gordon?
I think Gordon, and I know the hand-wringing of the fumbles, he's going to lose his job. Mike Boone's going to be terrific. I look back, Mike Boone has been in the NFL a long time. He has 3 games with more than 10 carries. 3. And they were in 2019 at the end of the year. He's got 1 game over like 55 yards or so. So not really a big sample size. He wasn't even a workhorse in college. So projecting Mike Boone to suddenly mid-career, or for him, probably later career, to all of a sudden be unseating Melvin Gordon, I'm totally skeptical of that. First off, it's Melvin Gordon's job. I don't know how many times he has to fumble going forward, but it's a decent amount to even have this as a question. And and Mike Boone, I'm pretty sure this week will be the running back too. But let's play this out for another. This is the rest of the season. Javonte Williams isn't coming back. And so I think that Latavius Murray is part of their macro plan, not their micro. So it may not be week 5. It may not be week 6. But generally for the rest of the season, Latavius Murray is the guy that would benefit from a Melvin Gordon misstep or injury. Not right now, but soon is my proclamation for that. And Latavius Murray is out there in a ton of leagues. What are some of your tidbits or recommendations for dynasty waivers of the future this week?
I thought both Boone and Latavius Murray made sense as ads, right? I would just keep scooping up all the backup running backs, right? There's a real reason why I jumped, I track every week my average ranking in the power rankings in all of my leagues. And I jumped like 0.7 of a point, which is a huge jump in 1 week across my power rankings because of, right, we're to the phase of the season where it's we kick the other people's hind parts. Sorry, Joe, because we're sort of, we're benching starting running backs because we have too many of them, right? Where everyone else is sort of, struggling with attrition. We're sort of
bye-week start. That's when we thrive.
Absolutely. And injuries are adding up, and right, we're just sort of, we're really sort of beginning to bludgeon people with our depth and our lineup utility at running back, and that's what we're kind of seeing here. So I think keep adding those guys, right? Again, just as one goes down, right? You lose Cordero Patterson, right? Tyler Algier is probably added, but then you go right to Caleb Huntley, right? Like you keep going down the dial, right? It's not the first guy up should already be rostered. It's the second guy up that you want to grab, and then just you keep recycling them over and over again each week as the situations change. But yeah, I mean, I think adding both of them, maybe 5 to 10% on both of them, right? I'm interested in as many shots as I can take at the running back position. I think Murray's the more likely answer. I think he's the more, what success looks like for Latavius Murray's probably better than what success looks like for Mike Boone. But I would say take shots on all of them would sort of be my recommendation.
Yeah, I think this is more of one of the more fascinating weeks that I'm curious to see. Like I have some waivers that run midday Wednesday, and it absolutely might be one of those that I end up adjusting for some of the later day ones based on those data points. Because my thought was Boone would go for more than Murray.
I agree with that.
But I've heard some conflicting opinions, and I think it's going to take a few leagues of hearing and seeing what happens before seeing if I have to adjust. Because I'm bidding more on Murray than Boone. I'm sure I'll get at least 1 or 2 Boones, but I think if you bid the same on both, you'll get a heck of a lot more Murray, is my general sense.
I have 14% of my rosters with Mike Boone on them, so I feel already in a positive direction based on
already. How did you have a running back 3? When were you picking him up? Was that from the offseason?
I had some running back 3s just with there was some injury stuff. Like I've just tried to I've just had a couple of holes on rosters where I just couldn't sort of fill it, and I just have been sort of going through running back 3s of just trying to optimize it.
I will say, other than outside of the Rams and Ravens, Denver's way up there in high leverage opportunity. So Melvin Gordon, number 1, could be big if he gets a bigger market share than. And we've talked about this. What do we call it? The Alexander Madison effect,
where
the backup gets more than the starter had if they are much better than the number 3. And so if the gap of Gordon to Boone is bigger, and it probably is, than Williams to Gordon, then again, Melvin Gordon could be a monster, first of all. And then, but if you just get this cleared out and clarified, this is a rising offense. I think Denver in a month is going to be better than all the hand wringing in the first 2-3 weeks. I think they're going to figure it out. I think they're going to be better. And this is a team that uses the running back position a heck of a lot more than 20 teams in the NFL. So this is one to watch. And again, I don't say this every week or much, but yeah, this is one to not empty the holster, but be aggressive-ish. Be aggressive-ish and don't let this pass you by, because know there's people like Jordan and Chad in your leagues that we're going to be preemptive. And this scenario is a pretty outlier one in terms of you got a guy that was in London and he got signed from the other team and he's in here. And then Mike Boone was the running back 3, but now the running back 1 is fumbling. And like, it's an interesting scenario on a potentially good offense. So,
yeah. Hey, by the way, this week inspired me on something, and actually we're going to run with it. We're going to try a week trial of it. So be on the lookout for it. I talked to Joe, and I'm going to do a late week sort of preemptive waiver wire, right? Sort of preemptive transaction ideas, right? So that'll react to late in the week injury news on Fridays, on Saturdays, right? We'll be hitting on guys like, hey, Latavius Murray's active, Tony Jones is inactive. You need to go add Latavius Murray, right? Because maybe this thing breaks in his direction. We already saw that Mark Ingram was vulnerable. Like all of these situations, we saw Trey Sermon. We've seen some other ones. Marcus Callaway, Josh Reynolds benefited. So I think that there's a lot of opportunities that your general waiver wire articles, the one that I write, the one that comes out on Wednesdays, it's
1.0. It's part
stale
of the
by the
plan,
time
yeah.
Friday or Saturday comes around. There's just so much information that we get, and I write it without the benefit of even Wednesday injury reports. I don't know what's going to happen at that point. So all of that stuff is really going to add up. So it's a late week thing, and I think it's something that's really going to give us an edge. So be on the lookout for it, like it, recommend it to them, and maybe we can do it on a weekly basis.
Yeah, I think there's 2 series of transactions during the week, and that Friday, Saturday into Sunday morning one is critical, because we finally have the final status, and you get changing, evolving situations, and that's how some people did get Latavius Murray, in the 24 hours leading up to kickoff this past week, or when they found out, frankly, they were picking him up to be on the Saints because they had Alvin Kamara inactive this week, which caught a lot of people. So we got just a couple dynasty trades here this week. One of them is it's an interesting format because it's an Empire League. So all of a sudden, if you're defending champ, you're being pretty aggressive. Titles mean more. It just means more is how this works. So this is we've got Najee Harris and Devonta Smith plus the Pittsburgh defense, which is good but not great, for Nick Chubb and the Buffalo defense. So upgrade there. And then you've got Najee Harris and Devonta Smith for Nick Chubb. What are your thoughts in Empire and a little shorter trajectory environment?
This is a big step in terms of the shorter trajectory arc would be what I would say. I think the longevity factor is definitely on the Nick Chubb or on the Najee Harris side of this would be the thing I would say. And truly, how difference making is Chubb if he's not going to be sort of in that receiving centric role in that offense would be the concern that I would have.
He's doing better though. He's doing better. He's running more routes, and I think
he's about 50% of the work share the past couple of weeks in terms of that receiving stuff. So yeah, it is promising. And again, if Hunt were to go down, Chubb would, I think, really be able to almost Alexander Madison this from the starter role, which is the rare feat. Yeah, I mean, what's your thoughts? Is this person a defending champion? Would be the other question that I would have.
Now, I don't know if they have to win 2 or if they have to win 3 or if there's an Empire pot and you just win a heck of a lot more. But let's assume it's a title in this year is worth, let's say 1.5x or 2x, or let's put a multiplier to it. Then the main thing you're losing, let's say, is 2 years. 2 years of a running back prime. And I think a lot of people, ancillary note, are running Najee Harris out the door like he's horrible. And I would just say, be careful. Be careful of just throwing dirt all over a round 1 running back that finished top 12 in year 1 and say they're horrible. I think people are still remembering Trent Richardson or something like that. But be very careful about calling a player horrible that has that profile, because you can get burned 6 ways from Sunday by just like trading low on a guy like that. Now, this isn't trading low per se. I mean, you're getting Nick Chubb back. But I think Devonta Smith is another one that, I mean, what's his upside if A.J. Brown misses time? Historically, he's missed time. I mean, you're going to auto start that guy those weeks, right?
Yeah.
And Smith blew up the other week. I mean, he's a guy you put in your wide receiver 3 spot. You're talking about a pedigreed player on one of the best offenses in the NFL right now.
Right.
So that's not a throwaway. I personally wouldn't do this because I'm higher on Najee Harris than what he's done so far.
Yep.
I think the 2 years is meaningful. I think Nick Chubb has outs, has pathways to being elite, but generally he's been very, very, very good.
Yes.
Not elite. You watch the Browns games and you would say he's elite, but then you look at the box score in your fantasy team and you say, you're like in the radius of elite.
Yes.
You're in the squint your way. Like he's the guy that he has the lowest points for guys that run for like 100-yard games. Like he has to score a touchdown. Like I hate guys that you just know going in, they're going to catch a pass, maybe 2. Like they don't have 7 catch upside.
Mm-hmm.
It just never happens.
Yeah. Can you
If
do
the
this deal
Browns-
for McCaffrey? Like, because I think that might change your ceiling a little bit.
Oh yeah. I think that could be in play. Now him catching 9 balls, going 9 for 9 and 81 yards and a touchdown. If you see some of the catches that McCaffrey made this past week, it's like vintage. Finally, yes, Baker, make your life easier,
Right.
please.
Right.
Spam the easy button.
Life doesn't have to be so hard.
For sake, exactly. I know it's apparently hard to get the ball to DJ Moore, and Tommy Trimble is just easy to run 5-yard outs. I mean, you could get Evan Ingram. Talk to the Giants on how to do that. But anyway, I just don't. I wouldn't give up Devonta Smith as just like that doesn't matter.
Right.
And that's kind of the feel of this. All right,
Dying
we got one
season on Najee Harris seems like it might be open.
Yeah, it's open. Well, when you're outside the top 20 running backs, where a lot of people are saying running back is dead, and you're outside the top 20 dead guys, then yeah, that's some people are saying start Jalen Warren. We've got 12 team and PPR IDP Allen Robinson, more of a talking point for Allen Robinson, for Adrian Phillips IDP and a 24-second. So
I don't know who Adrian Phillips is.
You don't need to.
I couldn't pick him out of a lineup, but I'd
adjust the rest.
I'd take the second.
Okay. Well, I was going to ask you. I mean,
Allen Robinson.
What is going on with Allen Robinson?
He's been horrible. He's been
horrible.
He looked horrible. He's played horrible. He was horrible last year. I thought there was maybe a little bit of James Harden Houston going on with him last year in Chicago.
No,
that wasn't the case.
They'd rather throw 5-yard outs to Tyler Higbee all day.
Yes. By the way, Tyler Higbee is like exactly what we thought. A lot of people thought Cole Kmet was going to be this volume hog. It's like he's kind of what people wanted Kyle Pitts to be, right? This dominant volume hog on the other side of a really good wide receiver. It's just Tyler Higbee instead of it being just Ron Coast.
Yeah. All right. The dumbest thing I did this week, I told Jordan before the show, I made it 6 days and 20 hours. I had a good streak. It's like that occupational, construction site, nobody injured, nobody's lost an eye in 114 days. And then sadly the sign goes to 0. You're like, oh God, Joe, what happened? So someone put a nail gun through their foot. So here's what I did. And this reminded me of all the old people commercials. I did this. This happened. You would think I'm double my age. All right. So pick up the phone, talking on the phone to my wife. And here we go. Talking. I get this inclination of like, oh, I wanted to see if, so-and-so texted me. I literally, while one hand was holding the phone, I start reaching around with my other hand for my pockets on the couch going, where's my phone? I'm talking to a human through a phone-like device, not through anything, touching the phone. And I'm looking for the phone with my other hand.
Did you say out loud, I can't find my phone? Did you say that out loud? Like
out loud? No. In my head, absolutely. It was
that doesn't
so
make you old.
bad.
That makes you actually a parent. That's
was
a parent
so
thing.
bad. My phone, where is it? This is the exact like grandpa has his glasses on his head and he can't find them because he fell asleep on the couch. And he doesn't know where they are. And now he picks up the newspaper and can't read. I can't believe that happened. So anyway, dumbest thing I did this week. All right, we got a couple quotes from the Football Guys Dynasty Forum to finish it out. Kareem Hunt definitely has value, but he's behind Nick Chubb. And while he may be in a better spot next year, he'll be 28, which is not young for a running back.
That's true.
Is Kareem Hunt running out of time? Okay. Is Kareem Hunt running out of time? Is he basically like a hyper expensive injury away guy? Do you think like this whole, like you can plug him in as your, like during buys coming up, I'm sure he'll be in more lineups as a running back 2 or flex. Like, Do you think on the macro analysis level, does that have a lot of value?
The
whole injury away plus guy.
It depends. Like there's a limited amount of people that he's probably like one of a handful. Like Jamal Williams is in that landscape where
AJ Dillon a little bit.
Yeah. AJ Dillon. There's not a lot of people that you can do that with, but he's one of them. I think that is on that landscape.
But the whole like getting a lead job at 28 and like suddenly he's going to start carrying value and like he's going to, at that point, has he eroded? So he's not going to be like a top 10 guy production wise if he gets that job. Like
you're looking for like a James Conner type situation at Arizona, right? Isn't that like that's kind of what you're hoping for with him? Like,
but he did that at like 25.
Right.
Not 28.
Yes, agreed.
Kareem Hunt already had that in Kansas City.
Agreed.
He lost it. He devolved to committee guy.
Yes.
I don't know. I watch him and I think he's lost a little something, and obviously he's 27. This is not a bash Kareem Hunt thing, but he's lost something from years ago. He should, frankly, but he didn't have a lot to lose. He's not an elite physical specimen for his position. He's not. Let's face it. He's a try hard guy plus. Mm-hmm. He's very good. But I think at 27, I've seen some cracks. 28, we're going to see more. I don't think he has a lot to lose. So I'm just skeptical of this. Like everyone holds him up on this pedestal with this big ceiling. And I don't know we're going to get to 2023 and he's going to really have it. A little skeptical. All right, last one. There's nothing wrong with an overpayment if it makes your roster construction and or starting lineup better.
Well, you can overpay, right? I mean, you can overpay to make something better, right? I could send 4 firsts for Cooper Kupp, right? I've overpaid, but I've made my roster better, right? Like,
I think they mean in a relative, like people say you overpaid. It's not egregious, but I mean, if you've got a hole or you're a really strong team, I think we say that all the time, right? There's almost like a multiplier if you're improving your lineup.
Yeah. And that's, I mean, yes, I think you're more at what gives me pause where people pay for depth, right? And kind of the conversation just piggybacking off of the Hunt thing, right? And some of the other conversation we've had in this, which is like, what's the value of a second round pick? Like, well, it just going back to the Geno thing. Well, it's a day 2 guy who might be an injury away guy. Well, Brian Robinson, right? TDP, right? Rashad White. Those are just they're premium injury away guys. But if you just were sort of recycling the picks, right, you could have gotten Jamal Williams for later. You could have gotten other players who had less shine but fit a similar role later on, right? So I think sort of being in that in that space does make some sense.
Yeah, and I think if you have a weakness, especially if you're a team 3-1, 4-0, and you've got one spot, I mean, you really need to be beating the pavement, and trying to explore fixing that. Like I've been in situations where it's like, no, I'm fine, I'm good. Well, you need to hunt. Because you have a total points title, which is meaningful. We've talked before, and we'll talk a lot, more in a month or two, how important a bye is. Mm-hmm. Hugely important. Adam Harstead has written probably dissertations on probabilities for postseason and titles and all this. And you just need to increase your probabilities whenever possible. And, you can't, it's tough to do that with an actual weakness. You could be really strong somewhere else. And that's why it's funny. Like it's almost like a roadmap or like paint by numbers for me, because so much of the roster is running back that when you have the opportunity to sell one or it's conducive to sell one, that's almost the typical construction for a trade is something involving a running back that is more situational or the value is good to explore that. And addressing is that wide receiver, one of your starting spots. Is that, tight end, I've been dying on the vine. Let me be one of the higher ups at the position, or super flex quarterback. Or again, it's just having that equation of what it is to address a trade and address a weakness. But yeah, the overpayment part, there was actually a good quote from the chat. An overpayment today is an underpayment tomorrow.
Right.
It does shift. It does shift by the day. You grade a trade, and all of a sudden next month it looks a little different. Next off season it definitely looks different.
Right. Where I find that if you're going to overpay for elites, right? Like, what gives me pause is where people overpay sort of in the middle of your roster, right? From player,
Ecosystem,
right? 6 to 15, where people sort of pay a lot or will trade the top guys to sort of lengthen the depth there. That's the mistake, right? Where I would rather pay a ton for Mahomes or for, an actual answer, right? Or pay a ton for Christian McCaffrey or whatever, like pay a ton for an elite player as opposed to, I'd rather pay, overpay for Cooper Kupp than to try and like nitpick with like, oh, maybe Allen Robinson will bounce back, right? Like let's spend our time actually trying to fix the issue.
Give
with
a
an
third
elite
plus for
athlete.
Allen Robinson.
Right.
Yeah.
Might as well just start handing out first for Cooper Kupp. You know what I mean?
Well, that's
I'd
what
rather
I find
do that.
Yeah, and that's one of my points I've made over the years is that I find it interesting on how wide the value is on backup running backs. Like some are worth like almost a first round pick, looking at you, Tony Pollard. And then you have others that are like a fourth. Like last year, Mark Ingram was like a fourth.
Okay.
And it's like, aren't they the same guy?
I refuse to believe that Tony Pollard was actually ever worth a first. I think that was only in mythical leagues that podcasters talked about. I refuse to believe that is true because I've never seen it happen in real life.
Quick quote. I thought you were
unicorn.
Kidding. I thought it was a joke. I even went home and laughed to myself. I thought she made a great joke. Erroneous. One of the best lines ever written in the movie.
Oh, it's so good.
Can only be delivered. Okay. All right. That is going to do it in this episode. Jam-packed. We talked about a little bit of trading. What's up with Allen Robinson? A lot of profiles at the top of the show. Updating priors. I had no idea when I got on the call that Jordan was going to talk about Geno Smith pre-show, during the show, maybe post-show. It's a Geno Smith world, and we're just living in it.
I'm going to get a jersey. I'm going to get a Geno jersey.
Exactly. Updating priors on Dameon Pierce as well. A little bit of J.K. Dobbins talk. And again, Jordan's pitch, again, I think there's really is two different periods of acquisition of players. You got the Wednesday waivers, which frankly, little archaic. Like you said, we don't even have practice reports. A lot of times we're putting that in. And Wednesday doesn't even matter. It's the pregame to the pregame to the pregame. And by Friday, and I do a quick 3 to 5 minute injury report on Friday night, Saturday morning for Football Guys. So you can check that out as well. But yeah, doing the prep for that on Friday night is basically that secondary period. Jordan doing a written post. So make sure you're emailing Football Guys to get that off the ground and keep it off the ground there. And I've said before, I mean, look up Jordan's content, my content, Dynasty content, and give it some page views, as well as, if you like something, say something, whether it's on Twitter or email to Joe Bryant and Football Guys at large, just because popular content stays and unpopular content eventually recycles out. So if you like something, make sure it stays is what I would say as our own pitch to have content that we deem important for the Dynasty community and this listenership. That's how it stays. I am Chad Parsons. He is Jordan McNamara. And until next time, good luck in your Dynasty leagues.